Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the meeting of the Executive Scrutiny Board here at Derby City Council on the 10th of February 2025 in the Council Chamber at Derby. I'm Chris Poulter. I'm Councillor for Spondon, Chair of the Executive Scrutiny Board. I'll be chairing the meeting, so I'll take straight on to item 1 on the agenda. Apologies, please. Any? No apologies. Any late items? No late items. Declarations of interest from the committee members, please. There are none. Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting held on the 6th of January. Can I have a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Eyre, Councillor Mulhall. Thank you. Forward plan. Has anybody got any, bearing in mind the agenda tonight, anybody issues with the forward plan, anything they want to raise? No? Good. Item 6 then is the Council Cabinet responses to scrutiny recommendations. I think there was one last time, Stephen, which was accepted, if I understand rightly. Yeah.
Or was it under consideration?
Yes, taken into consideration was the expression. Yes. Okay. Item 7 then, we'll go straight on to the Council Cabinet agenda. We've got quite a few items on that agenda, so a lot of things to scrutinise tonight. So I'm going to move straight into, unless there's any representations for bringing people up the agenda, or anybody got any desperate need to, other than taking normal course? Yes. You sure? Okay, well, if the time gets to such a point where you need to be brought forward, let me know and I'll consider it, okay? Good. So, item 8 then is the proposed development of Blackmore Street, Derby, for housing. And I guess that's going to be, is it? Do you mind stating your name and your role before speaking, thank you, or when you speak?
Thank you, Chair. Karen Briley, Acting Head of Strategic Housing. So this report covers the proposed development of a site at Blackmore Street. It's actually requesting a revised delivery timetable, budget and contractual approval dates to deliver the affordable homes, which is 36 new bungalows. The proposal is to agree to the principle of developing the site and to approve the project budget within the capital programme. There is capacity within the latest approved business plan to develop the site. We're also seeking a delegation of authority to the Strategic Director of Communities in place in consultation with the Director of Finance and the Cabinet Member for Housing to agree the terms of and make arrangements for the Council to enter into all contracts and agreements necessary to deliver the project within the approved budget. We're also asking for a further delegation that if alternative grant funding becomes available, that we can submit a grant claim for and accept any funding. The new homes will be incorporated within the Council's housing stock, and we will also take a updated report to the Council's Project Management Office, the PMO. The reason for the budget increase is due to in part due to an amended drainage design, which has resulted in an engineered solution being required on site, where we are having to lower some areas, build it up in others, which is necessitating retaining walls. But Severn Trent did actually make this request quite late in the day. That has actually resulted in a significant increase in the cost estimate. Due to the site levels having to change, it also means that we're unable to keep the site accommodation and storage in a single area on site. So it will have to be relocated whilst the site levels are adjusted. That impacts on the overall contract period as well as the additional cost for the relocations. We've also found that we have received tenders recently and there has been a significant increase in the cost of utility service provision, so we have significantly increased the cost of that. We've also changed the road so that the road will actually be constructed to an adoptable standard, which will then allow it to be maintained as part of the public highway, and it will also mean that Severn Trent can adopt and maintain the below ground drainage. We've also included an additional provisional sum for service protection, as we've also found recently that we are receiving statutory plans indicating that there are no services in an area, and then when work commences we're actually finding them. So we have an additional sum in for that. Because of the overall works, we're also finding that the contractors' prelims are also increasing in the amount on the percentage that they're applying. So again, we're having to allow for an increase in that. We have actually got expressions of interest for contractors, and we have gone out to tender. Those tenders are actually due back in March, with a view to start on site in June and practical completion in November 2026. As I say, we have got the capacity within the business plan, and the project does meet the internal financial parameters that we normally go for. So happy to take any questions. Obviously, there is more detail within the pink papers.
Thank you, Karen. Yes, I noted, no, approval was given a year ago, wasn't it? So we were well into this. But the extent of the budget increases we can't talk to until later with the pink papers. So it'll come back up later on, folks. If there's any questions on the rest of it that can't be dealt with under the papers, yes, Councillor Kerr.
Chair, I just wanted to raise again the roundel for the climate implications, because this is, the project is excellent, and I know why the energy one here is dark green, because it's planned to have PVs on the roofs, which is absolutely the right thing to do. They're going to be really good energy efficient buildings, but the building of them will mean that there is a lot of waste created as part of that process. There will be transport to and from site. The creation of the buildings will have implications, because the likelihood is that they won't actually be zero carbon in process. So either the climate implications need a lot more explanation, or I think we actually need to be looking at the way they work. And I mentioned this last time, and the information they give us, or to be doing some more training. So I don't know whether, Chair, we could push that forward a little bit by saying, putting forward a recommendation for a review of how this is working, and to bring that back in due course. Or maybe something that Cabinet, we should be asking Cabinet to review it.
I'm sure the officers will take another look at the equation, if you like, and see where that goes. In the meantime, if you want to put together a recommendation in relation to the general training issues around
climate implications and the way this works.
That's up to you if you want to bring that forward.
Okay. Shall I bring it forward on another occasion in the meeting and work behind the scenes?
What I don't want is to do it on every issue on the meeting, or we're all right.
If I write some words and bring it back on another one.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Karen, for the report. It's just a very brief point, really. I think for all members, it would be a massive help if when reports come like this, they can include a map to show us exactly whereabouts the area is. Thankfully, this one's fairly easy to find, but we're looking on the map, Blackmore Street and Grange Avenue, it's not sort of clear which one it would be on. It's not clear how they link up the streets between the two of them. For any things that come like this, it would be a massive help if a map could be included, just showing whereabouts it is.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's just to say really how much I support this. I think we all would. We all have casework from people who are various points of homelessness or looking for new homes. So it's regrettable that the timescales slipped and that the cost has gone up. Although that's no fault of the council, it's Severn Trent that have come in late in the day, as it's stated, and particularly bungalows as well, because we don't often see new build bungalows coming forward. So I think there's a real need, and whilst there is a delay, I'd very much welcome this going ahead as soon as we can possibly move forward with it, Chair.
Okay, so I think we can note the report, welcome the development, and we'll have a look at the budget on it under pink papers. Okay. Moving on then to item 9, the assurance of local authority adult social care services.
Hello, Chair. My name is Andy Appleyard. I'm the Acting Director of Adult Social Care Services. So thank you for the opportunity to talk about the assurance of local authority adult social care services. So in May 2023, the CQC, the independent regulator of adult social care in the UK, published their framework for the assurance of local authority services. And moving us away from the sector-led improvement approach, which has been in place for a number of years. The assurance process focuses on 4 themes, which have either 2 or 3 specific areas of focus. It's working with people, providing support, ensuring safety, and then leadership. The CQC utilises a 4-point rating scheme similar to Ofsted. Those services will then be rated as either outstanding, good, requires improvement, or as inadequate. Derby's Adult Services received an assurance visit from the CQC in April of 2024, and the report was published in August of 24. We were rated as requires improvement through that process. When the CQC published their framework, Derby established an improvement board and worked with other local authorities in the East Midlands region and the Local Government Association to create a self-assessment process. We undertook a self-assessment process in December of 2023, and at that time judged ourselves to be rated as requires improvement, and following that created an improvement plan to set out how we would improve and how we would move forward from our current position. Although we've been rated as requires improvement, we are not required to provide any further information to the CQC, but we'll obviously use the information that was included in their report to add to our improvement plan to ensure we can continue to improve and move forward. The CQC assurance process commenced with a local authority information return being sent to our statutory director of adult social care services, and the information return is a detailed request covering 38 specific documents, including a self-assessment. We conducted an additional self-assessment before we submitted that to the CQC, and again rated ourselves as requires improvement, but noted that we had moved forward across the 4 different themes that made up the CQC inspection process. There was an additional request relating to the care records of 50 people who received care and support, which included a case evaluation as well as their contact details and other advocacy information. That was provided to the CQC, and although we provide care and support to 3,500 people, or in the region of that number, only 5 people were spoken to as part of the inspection process. During the CQC's visit, several inspectors were on site for 3 days, and they spent time speaking to internal staff, external colleagues from across the system, people who use services, and advocates. During the inspection process, as you would all expect, relevant parties were spoken to, including our Chief Exec, Strategic Director of People Services, and the Independent Chair for Derby and Derbyshire Safeguarding Adults Board. When we received the draft report from the CQC, we noted that there were a number of factual accuracies or factual inaccuracies in the process, and we submitted a comprehensive 74-page factual accuracy response to the CQC. Unfortunately, there weren't changes made to our report. That led to any changes in our specific ratings. As I say, we were rated as requires improvement across those 4 individual domains. At present, we are working through our improvement journey. We've held some Stronger Together events, so full staff events for all staff in adult social care, our wider partners and people who draw upon services. As I say, we have an improvement plan in place and we'll continue to move towards our objective of achieving good in the next inspection process. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Obviously, it's a new process both for you and for them. Nevertheless, we need to take serious account of what the report says. And I know that it's also going to be referred to the Audit and Governance Committee in relation to their viewing of outside reports in relation to the council. So to get a further deep dive there, yeah?
It will, Chair.
Any other further questions? Yes, Councillor Wright.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Do you have any interim information at all in terms of your attempts to respond to the requirement to improve? Please, thank you.
So, as I say, we've already got an improvement plan in place. So all we're doing is building on the blocks that we've already put in place. Safeguarding was one of the areas where specific concerns were raised about our local performance. We had a significant backlog in terms of safeguarding concerns, that being the number that we had to respond to and also the time frame that people had to wait. Significant action has been taken since the publication of the report, and we now have moved heaven and earth to change our position. We've moved forward in a range of different areas, so we're comfortable with our trajectory, but recognise there is still work to go on our journey.
That's okay.
I was wondering, Chair, why it took so long for this report to be getting to Cabinet, given that the report came in last August.
So we've been supported by the Local Government Association. They're working with organisations that have been rated as requires improvement by the CQC. And we were working to put on two of our, as I say, Stronger Together events. So wanted to bring all of the feedback together from people who use services, our staff teams, to add to our improvement plan. And then once we were comfortable with that, we wanted to bring the report here to speak to everybody and like talk through our process. So yes, recognise there was a little bit of a delay there, but that was because we had specific events that we wanted to conduct so we could make sure that our improvement plan was in line with what the CQC had pointed out during the inspection process.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's certainly very valuable to gather information from a wider cohort of people to inform a plan going forward. But it seems to be, more than 6 months between, about 6 months between receiving a report and that going into a formal discussion process, I do feel is quite long, and to have had it formally reported, and then at this point to be moving forward into a further plan, which we actually haven't got here, seems to be strange.
No, I recognise we haven't got the plan here, but I also recognise it probably makes sense for the officers to provide something of a plan in answer to the report for Cabinet. So is the reason, where is the plan, where is it being considered first, Andy?
So it gets considered through our improvement board. We are developing a new strategy on the back of the Stronger Together events that we've had. So we've tried to use it as a marker in the sand to look at where we need to move forward. So a little bit of a reset for us. As I say, we already had an improvement plan in place, but wanted to bring that together so everybody could get behind the journey that we had to go on in Derby.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask about the process for feeding back the factual inaccuracies that were noted in the report? Obviously, opinions and judgments and so on, you sort of have to take on the chin in a way. But if there are factual inaccuracies in a report, there should be a way of challenging those really and putting them right. So is there any way we can feed back or into the process to try and change that so that there is a more responsive outcome in the future?
I guess, Andy, you included that in the report, the 74-page response, did you, which didn't change the outcome, is that right?
I think it's fair to say that when we were inspected by the CQC, we were one of the first 10 local authorities to be inspected. The process was very new for the CQC. We've met with senior leads from the Care Quality Commission, and I'm sure people will have seen some of the information in the press about the changes that have happened because of the lack of confidence in the regulator. I think They've taken learning from this new part of their process, so hopefully things will be different for other local authorities and then also for us in the future.
Did I see another hand somewhere? No? Okay, well, unless there's anything else to be said, I think we should note the report and wait for, and we'll be interested to see how it goes at audit and accounts as well. Okay, thank you. Moving on then to item 10, council tax, empty, unoccupied and second home charges. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Alison Parkin, Director of Finance. So this report seeks changes to the council's council tax on empty and unoccupied properties and second homes within the city. The Local Government Act 2012 amended the Local Government Finance Act and gave billing authorities discretion to levy an empty homes premium and there's been empty and substantially furnished for at least 2 years, and the City Council chose to enact that discretionary power with effect from April 2013. Later in 2018, the Council Tax Act was passed, which further amended that Local Government Finance Act. And again, Derby City Council chose to use that discretionary power. That Act again was updated in October 2023 and has further enhanced the charging options, enabling billing authorities to reduce the minimum period for the implementation of the council tax premium for long-term empty premises from 2 years to 1 year, and it also enables billing authorities to introduce a council tax premium of up to 100% on second homes. So they largely fall into two distinct parts. The first part is to bring forward the period from 2 years to 1 year when an unoccupied and substantially unfurnished dwelling can be charged a premium of 100%, and secondly to enable a charge of 100% premium for any dwellings commonly known as second homes which are no one's sole or main residence and are substantially furnished. The gross estimated additional income contained within this report could generate additional council tax of over £1.6 million, and this also comes with the additional benefit of bringing homes back into use across the city. Appendix 1 of the report details the number of homes affected. So the empty and unoccupied homes is 778 properties and second homes 179 properties. Consultation exercise was conducted between the 11th of October and the 13th of December, so that was a 9-week period, and it concluded that 65% were strongly supportive or supported the long-term and empty home subsidy and 64% in support for the second homes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that summary. Questions, comments? Councillor Kerr.
2 questions. Firstly, how do we identify a second home? And the second question is, you've identified additional revenue that this is expected to create for the coming financial year, but we've already set and we already agreed our council tax base. So how does this impact on our council tax base calculation?
Yeah, so the classification for second homes are detailed in the report in terms of, and also details an exemption list as well within the report. In terms of the council tax base, we'd already made assumptions within the council tax base should this be approved by Cabinet in terms of the first part of it, which comes into effect from April 2025. Of course, the second element of the report is not enacted until 2026.
Okay, Alison, we talked about this in another forum, and yes, nearly 1,000 houses brought back into full-time use is obviously desirable, but there are times when developers or owners have good reason not to be able to bring them back as quickly as they would like. And we talked about the potential for flexibility and recognising the difference between somebody who's just not doing anything and somebody who's trying but is facing difficulties. Because bringing it from 2 years to 1 is a significant change.
Yeah, There's no discretion within this. I did have a word with the council tax team about that. So I mean, there is a year to be able to do that. So we'd anticipate that significant progress would be made in that time, to be able to bring that property back into use.
But I mean, there are the other issues of identifying the properties and starting to work with the owners as well. I think Ian, you had a view on it, and to a degree.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In terms of the empty homes team, which, as you say, work with owners to encourage them to bring the properties back into use, we never engage with owners where a property's been empty for less than a year, Chair. And normally, the earliest that we start engaging with owners is closer to 2 years before we start really engage with them and giving them the full range of options that we can offer to bring their properties back into use, and indeed point out ultimately the sanctions that could happen if the properties aren't brought into use, that the council could consider a CPO in extreme cases, Chair.
Okay, any other questions, thoughts? No, in that case, we note the report without any recommendations at this point. So moving on then, we are at item 11, sale of land at Grovebury Drive and sale of land at Oregon Way. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Emily Feenan, Director of Corporate Governance, Property and Procurement. So this Cabinet report seeks authority to dispose of 2 small parcels of land at Grovebury Drive and Oregon Way. The parcels are ransom strips, that is, they're a small piece of land that must be crossed to enable a much bigger area of land to be developed. On the open market, they have very little value, but to the owner of the land to be developed, gaining control of the ransom strip is critical for bringing forward development. In negotiating the sale of these land parcels to these special purchasers, the Council has unique opportunities to achieve significant capital sums and to facilitate delivery of significant housing numbers, essential to delivering our housing allocations. So taking each parcel in turn, the land at Grovebury Drive, which is in Blaegreaves Ward, there are plans with the Cabinet report. The council land is a small area of 0.21 acres, which offers access to development land, which is entirely in South Derbyshire. Through the access from Grovebury Drive, it will enable 150 units to be planned for to be developed out, and they form part of a larger development of 500 homes in South Derbyshire. These homes will contribute to the 6,000 units which we require our neighbouring authorities to deliver in order to meet our assessed housing need. The report sets out that the proposal is to grant an option to purchase the council land within 2 years of the date of the option at an agreed price subject to indexation. Once the council enters into the option, it will be obliged to sell, but it cannot compel purchase. In many respects, there is no certainty at this point, and it may take up to 2 years to complete and obtain the capital receipt, but this is a necessary first step in allowing this land to be brought forward for development. The second parcel of land is off Oregon Way in Cheddeston East. This, on the plan provided, it should be noted that a additional plan was circulated to all members at the end of last week to provide additional clarification on the extent of the development land. The council land, again, is a very small area of land of 0.13 acres, but it allows access to the development land, which will deliver approximately 215 units, plus a significant area of public open space. The development land is allocated housing land in the current local plan. These houses will contribute to the 12,500 houses the council must deliver within the city boundary to meet its assessed need. The proposal in this instance is to enter into a conditional sale of the council land, whereby the purchaser has 2 years to complete the sale, but is not compelled to complete if they do not obtain planning consent. Again, there is no certainty and it may take up to 2 years to complete and obtain the capital receipt. So there are 3 recommendations, Chair, to approve the sale of the 2 parcels of land at 2.1 and 2.2 and to delegate authority to myself as Director of Corporate Governance, Property and Procurement following consultation with the Cabinet Member for Governance and Finance and the Section 151 officer to finalise the terms of the sale and enter into all necessary contractual documentation. Thank you.
Thank you for that. What appears to be a fairly straightforward report and small pieces of not used land is a little bit more complicated than that. I think there might be some questions raised in this. Councillor Bolton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm quite concerned about, as you rightly say, they are small bits of land, but they're going to have huge impact on both of these locations, whether they be in Chaddesden East Ward or indeed Blakeries Ward. I am concerned on page 3, 5.1, ward councillors have been informed of the proposed sales. I regret to say that an officer has not contacted me at all about the sale of this land, and I would have appreciated a call from the relevant officer who wrote this report so that I could discuss that with him or her to get some of the issues that I've got of concern. So actually 5.1 in my case is not true. However, let's move on. I'm concerned about both pieces of land in actual fact. I live in Blakeries Ward and I did previously represent Chaddesden East. In my opinion, the land in question, the pieces of land that we are selling off, will have, as I said, huge impact. If they're building the amount of houses on both these sites, the people on Ellendale, Oregon Way, Groveby, Oaklands are going to have an increased amount of traffic in those areas if their houses are built. And I take on board, obviously, when we are consulted as a planning authority, as the officer quite rightly said, this is South Derbyshire land in Groveby, and obviously the Windmill Hill plantation is slightly different, but particularly looking at the Groveby Drive, the landing, and it's only a small map we have. We've got a big one of the Chaddesden East, but we haven't had a big colour one of Blakeries Ward. The corner of Groveby, where they are wanting to take the public open space, is on a bend. It's in a very dangerous location, in my view, for any safe transportation to take place there. And also, if they want a bus route, I don't think they've got much chance of that. But anyway, my point is, Stenson Road Bridge is not highlighted on the map that we have, but it is on the edge of Nicola Gardens, which you can't see. And it's a shame we haven't got a plan. My point is, 2 points really. Can we ask that there be another access? Because if there's going to be 600 homes and they're all going to be coming down Groveby Drive, that is a lot of transport. Could there not be another access further down Stenson Road? And going on to the Chaddesden East, which we have got a big plan for, which I thank the officers for doing. Ellendale Road is on a very steep hill, and there is, I don't know what this dotted line is here, but clearly they could have access off the Tennessee Road site. The report under 4.6 calculates the sale price of 250,000. My point is a request with that capital receipt, could not some of that money be spent in these 2 wards so that the community can be compensated in some way for these huge developments to be spent in the wards and the inconvenience that's going to cause to the communities in both wards? I think we've got to treat them both equally. But I do think, as well as the Section 106, which clearly we don't know yet, but I do feel this capital receipt that the council will receive for selling off these tiddly bits of land and are going to cause chaos in the communities where they are going to be sited if the 2 sites come to fruition. I really do feel strongly about this, that ward councillors weren't informed by the relevant officer and that we haven't had time to discuss it before tonight's meeting. And clearly the capital receipt that we're going to get can that be spent on the two corresponding communities, please?
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. You make some good points. In relation to the capital receipts, I suspect there may be a recommendation coming forward already in relation to that, because I agree there might be fairly insignificant portions of land, but they've got big ramifications to the communities in which they lie. Of course, all of those are going to be subject to planning, and I don't think the planning on these either site is going to be, even with this access, is going to be clear, and but it would only get permission for planning subject to all the planning regulations and discussions, which is why I presume there's a 2-year moratorium on buying the land, if you like, and probably only when planning comes forward. But you also make the issue around consultation, and whilst they are small pieces of land, Emily, it does have a serious knock-on effects for both areas and both communities. And I thought, is there a reason why consultation wasn't taken with the local public and with the local councillors?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, Councillor Bolton. I did provide full briefing at Cabinet in advance, and your fellow ward councillor advised me that he would speak to you in the first instance, and then if you had any questions, he would ask me to speak to you again. So apologies that there was that you didn't get the brief you wanted. I had hoped that it would be covered, but apologies. I'm more than happy to answer any specific questions that you have. I did speak to the ward councillors for Chaddeston East specifically, and I had intended to speak to you, but I did feel that I was assured that you would be briefed by your fellow ward councillor in the first instance, so apologies. In terms of, just to pick up on one point about traffic numbers, Councillor Bolton, in the Groveby Drive, the intention is that access will provide access for 150 of the total homes, and that there will be a further access within South Derbyshire land for the remainder of the development. So you wouldn't have all the traffic implications coming through Groveby. Obviously, as the Chair has mentioned, both of these proposals are subject to planning, and that planning process will take its normal course. However, this is just the first step in allowing these two developments to come forward to deliver these vital houses that the city desperately needs.
Sorry, Emily, then the 2 points, one in relation to the capital receipts and also in relation to consultation with the members. You've addressed Councillor Bolton's, but the public, why not the public being consulted in such a far-reaching ramifications of a paper?
It wouldn't be normal to consult on a sale like this. Consultation will come through with the planning process in the usual way. And in much the same way as you've mentioned capital receipt, compensation for the local community would come through Section 106.
I get that, but the danger is, of course, that the public's perception of openness and transparency is, well, how have they got this? How did they get this access from the council to be able to put this application forward in the first place? And how much have they paid for it? And what's been done with the money? What do you say to the capital receipts?
So the capital receipt, the capital sums to be received, if received, if the conditional sales options are realised, will come into the public domain once agreed, but they're not currently agreed and not been achieved. So, and obviously this is a public report to Cabinet, so providing transparency to the public through a Cabinet report that's also at Exec Scrutiny Board.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chair. I've raised my hand actually not in reference to what Emily just said, but it's just another question that I've got, which is specifically on the piece of land on Oregon Way. Is that classed as Green Wedge?
No, it isn't, Councillor Mulholland. The area for development is allocated housing land within the local plan and does not form part of the Green Wedge. the original plan that was in the cabinet report and it was published showed the pink land going to the development land going all the way over to Acorn Way, which is a mistake. So that's why I provided that revised report, which demonstrates that the land doesn't go as far as Acorn Way and retains what is green wedge in between the edge of the development land and Acorn Way.
Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. I was wanting to raise another issue which might also lead to a recommendation, that the communities are losing open space and there's a standard formula for how much open space would be included in the new development. And once it's all built and settled in, it'll still be a loss of space to the existing communities and it won't have been mitigated by the new development unless we do something about it at this point, I believe. So I was going to suggest that we should ask Cabinet to request that a similar additional areas of land be included as public open space in the proposed future development, in addition to what would normally be required on a development of that size. Now, I know that that is likely to mean that it's going to be a small cost, and it's only a small cost to the developer, so it's likely to slightly reduce our income if these ransom strips are sold. But I think it's what we should do for local people so that there isn't a net loss of public open space for those communities.
Is that possible at this stage, Emily, or would that be part and parcel of the planning?
In my view, that should form part of the planning process, Chair. I mean, it's obviously if Councillor Kerr wished to make a recommendation, that's fine, but my advice would be that that should be covered by the planning process. Okay, are you working on that, Councillor Kerr, on that recommendation?
I have the words that I've just read to you, Chair, but my concern is that the Section 106 process will consider the requirements of that area of development, and it hasn't got, the planning process does not have the knowledge of a land transfer that included loss of public open space. That is what Cabinet will be doing and deciding on Wednesday. It is not a planning issue, because the planners do not consider who owns what land. So,
Chair, if I may say, the land that's in consideration for sale today, in both these cases, amounts to less than half an acre of land in its entirety. So that is in terms of this report that's being considered, it is two very small areas of public open space that's being considered, essentially grass verge. You know, in both cases, you know, smaller than quite a lot of back gardens would be. So this report is not about significant loss of open space. Open space that is lost as a result of development will be part of the planning process of land which is not in our ownership at the current, the land which is in the ownership of the developer. So they are two separate sets of land, if you understand what I mean, Chair. This report is entirely concerned with two very small parcels of open space.
Okay, well, as I say, I suspect there may be another recommendation coming at some point, which might also address the point, Councillor Kerr, so if you want to wait for a little while. Yes, Councillor Rawson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question in relation to the Chaddiston East site. When this has been before planning in the past, there was a question, I think, about access from Acorn Way. Is that in the equation this time, or has that been ruled out?
I'm not close to what's being proposed in terms of access, but I understand that access isn't planned off Acorn Way at the current time, and that's why this land is being brought forward for sale to provide the access.
Absolutely get your concerns about breaking into Acorn Way and destroying its current function and causing the disruption to the green wedge and the space between the conurbations of Spondon and Chaddiston. So absolutely get your concerns there. I think that's shared by many. Councillor Eyre. Sorry, did you want to? Okay. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd absolutely share those concerns around any access and egress points on Acorn Way as well. I've got a number of concerns around the Oregon Way, the land at Oregon Way aspect of this, and as a ward councillor for the neighbouring area, I'm sure that doesn't really surprise anybody, but I think we're saying in this report, we've said a few times that we're looking at grass verges and that's all that these are. And in nature, they're not, because the whole point of this, the whole reason they're ransom strips, the whole reason we think they're as valuable to some individuals as we think they are, is because of what they open up. They open up these huge areas and huge swathes of land for future development. And looking at the Oregon Way one in particular, so the land that it would free up is for 215 houses. The field just to the north of this, so for anybody with the map, it's where the compass is. That field is currently part of Leesbrook Academy, but that's under a sale, consultation of sale to be sold off, likely for housing as well. And we're just a bit further down from where 600 houses are proposed by Erewash Borough Council as part of their core local strategy. Add in the houses proposed at Royal Hill Road and the houses proposed at land north of Chaddesden Wood, and you're looking at 1,000 houses around these areas, part of it freed up by this potential sale. So I don't think we can just consider this as a piece of grass verge. We're opening up a vast area for housing, which is part of a vast number of housing proposed in the area. So I think we need to look at it in that aspect, really. And should the sale go ahead, the money is set to go, as we've said, into capital receipts, which means that residents in this area and in Blaegreaves aren't set to see really any of the funding provided for benefit in the local community, despite the fact that they'll be harmed by the fact that this sale has gone ahead in terms of what would happen if planning is granted going forward. Something I'm sure that if we had run a consultation with local people, they wouldn't have been too pleased about. And this is of even more concern to me looking at the Oregon Way site, when we judge the fact that if there wasn't access and egress on Acorn Way, and that's not something I'd support, I think there shouldn't be access there, that this will be likely the only access and egress point into a site that was developed there. So, in a sense, we're selling off land that is designated as public open space with the knowledge that it is incredibly likely to be tarmacked and concreted over to make way for a development. And this is public open space, and I've got real concerns about us doing that. We as a council are essentially custodians of our public open space, and we're selling it off in this way, or the way that's been proposed. So that would be of a real concern for me. And flooding would be another concern I have, and I appreciate that's slightly more of a planning matter, but I don't sit on planning, I sit on this committee, so I'll mention it here. Acorn Way spent a lot of winter 23 and 24 underwater, being shut repeatedly, and Acorn Way is higher up than this site is, so this site would have been saturated for a heck of a lot of the time around then. So again, I had real concerns about us actively opening that up. But again, I accept that's more of a planning concern for this particular meeting. So those are the general concerns I have around this, but I have two specific questions, one brief and one not so brief that touched on what Councillor Bolton raised. So I'll just ask the brief one first, and we've sort of covered it in a sense without asking the question. So the money from this sale of land, if they go ahead, is set to go into capital receipts. Does it have to go into capital receipts, or could it be ring-fenced to spend within the local communities?
Yeah, it's up to the discretion of the council in terms of our capital policy. At the moment, it says that disposal goes into capital receipts, and we can use that for borrowing against to offset borrowing costs against the capital programme, or we can also use some capital receipts flexibility, which allows us to invest that money into transformation. But it is capital monies in terms of the receipt that's generated, but obviously, it's at the discretion of the council if it was to want to change any of those policies associated with that.
Alison, I get the council's current financial position alongside a lot of other councils, and we'll be talking about that later. But I think in these circumstances, for that amount of money, it's not going to make a massive difference. Whereas this proposal could make a massive difference to a number of communities, and consideration certainly ought to be given to at least some of it, if not all of it, being allocated or ring-fenced, as Councillor Eyre says. But I guess there might be a recommendation along those lines to come. Councillor Eyre, you've got a second point?
So thank you, Alison, for that one. And then on to the slightly less brief one. I'm going to be very, very picky with the language that we've contained in this and in the forward plan. So page 4 of the forward plan from the 14th of January 2025, when it mentions this proposal, states very clearly that all ward members will be consulted. So So the word it uses is consultant. We've heard the concerns of Councillor Bolton already around a specific instance where that hasn't happened. But the definition of consult is to seek information or advice from somebody. So the council made a commitment in the forward plan to seek information and advice from ward councillors. The terminology here is really, really important because consult is not the same as inform. Inform means to give somebody facts or information. And we're told in the report at 5.1 that ward councillors have been informed. We're not told that ward councillors have been consulted, which is what the forward plan said was the requirement of bringing this forward. And they mean, as I've said, very, very separate things. So the council set a requirement to seek information from ward councillors, but we're now being told that actually we didn't do that. We just told ward councillors what was happening, and in some instances we didn't even do that. So we've changed essentially what was felt in the forward plan to be required as a prerequisite of bringing this forward to where we are now. And given that we're told in this report officers have been working on this for quite some time, and the reports were published, from my gathering, 4 days, including a weekend, after the meeting with the Chaddesden East councillors was held, supports the idea that councillors have been informed, not consulted. Work's been going on this for a long time. The councillors were told, and then 4 days later, the reports came out. So they were informed on this. I think the report admits that, not consulted. So I've spoken with both elected members for Chaddesden East, and they feel the meeting held was to inform them, not consult them, and that when they were told about this, they were told there's nothing they could do to stop this or make it go another way or anything like that. It was a case of this is what's happening, this is when it's coming. And that's not how a consultation would work, that's how informing somebody would work. So given that the forward plan stated that ward members will be consulted, and we're now being told they were informed, and that ward members don't feel they were consulted, and in some cases not even informed, how compliant do we feel this is with the forward plan?
Thank you, Councillor. The forward plan is an information sharing document intended to give the public a view of what is coming forward in the Cabinet agenda and to inform members so that they can be aware of things that are coming forward. There's no requirement to be absolutely specific and the wording of it is not binding. It's our general convention, as you will have seen over many years of being a councillor, that we use the word consult when we contact councillors and talk to them. It was the timing of the meeting with the ward councillors was time to follow on from briefing with Cabinet, which you would normally expect to happen ahead of ward councillors and before publication of the report. So they were aware of it before the report was published, which would be fairly standard procedure for speaking to ward councillors. When I spoke to ward councillors, they asked, yes, you are correct, what steps could be taken. And they weren't informed that there was nothing that could be done. What they were informed was that this would come to Exec Scrutiny Board and there would be the opportunity for scrutiny at this board and for recommendations to be brought forward by this board for consideration by Cabinet. And it was also explained to them that this was very much about the sale of the 2 small areas of open space as opposed to the planning process for the larger developments, which will follow on, and that there would be the entire planning process, which obviously, with the chair of planning committee being one of those councillors, Councillor Pearce was aware of that process, and I know he's had conversations with Paul Clark as head of service for planning as well. So that is the timeline, and that is the process that was followed.
Thank you. I think that it's vitally important then that the language on the forward plan needs tidying up, because councillors expect, when we're told that we'll be consulted, councillors expect to be consulted, not informed. So I think that language absolutely needs tidying up if the case is that actually the language on the forward plan doesn't matter and other people will pick what happens. So I think that absolutely needs tidying up, because as elected members serving our communities and the residents we represent, we expect the documents we're provided with to mean what they say and do what they say. I think we can argue about whether language is interchangeable, and I think the definitions show that they're not the same thing, but when we're told that something's going to happen as councillors, we do tend to expect or at least hope that that's what's going to happen, and it doesn't seem to have happened in this case. We've used it interchangeably, so I think the language in the forward plan definitely needs looking at if we should just expect it not to go in that way.
Okay, so is there a recommendation or two that might come forward from this? And the reason I query whether Councillor Kerr wanted to listen to yourself first was because whatever recommendation comes forward could take into account the the public open space aspect and require some of the funding, because I get, Alison, the need for our budgetary position to be helped, but I think in this circumstance there's probably a need for that money to be spent locally. Who wants to go first with the recommendations?
I'm happy to go first, Chair, if you like.
Come first, and then
So
we'll
mine, it's a nice and simple one, so that recommend that any money raised from the sale of these parcels of land will be ring-fenced to be spent within the relevant wards on matters determined through consultation with the ward members. I can make any additions to that we want to add into that, yeah. But yeah, that would be the theme of the recommendation, yeah.
Yeah, Sarah Bolton, Councillor for Blakery's ward. Yes, I go along with what Matt has just said in my remarks. I'm not going to repeat myself, but really I do feel quite concerned about these small bits of land, which, as I said, are going to have a huge impact. Can I just come back on what the officer said? Under 5.1, I would expect an officer to have spoken to members, not rely on another member to tell me. That was my point. I wasn't... I just wanted to clarify the point, but I think if this happens again, the relevant officer should contact all the councillors, not rely on another councillor to do it. That was my point there. But I go ahead...
That's not the point. It's the officer.
I do feel quite strongly, and I support what Matt is saying, that I think we should really put our protests into Cabinet to ensure that the capital receipt, some part of that, is spent on both these wards.
Okay, so Councillor Kerr, does the recommendation already put forward deal with your concerns over the loss of public open space?
No, I think they're quite separate, but I wanted to raise another issue, Chair, because this is related...
Can we deal with the public open space matter first, and then we can go on to something else if necessary? So what would your recommendation be?
My recommendation is, as I read out before, sorry, I've just hidden it, to ask Cabinet to request that similar additional areas of land be included as public open space in the proposed future developments, in addition to what would normally be required on a development of that size. So
I must say, I have a difficulty with that, Councillor Kerr, because they are two different things. This is the sale of a portion of land. To then require for it to influence the plan of somebody else on a different area might be, I don't think it's a sensible thing to put forward, if I'm honest.
Well, my concern, the issues that were being raised is that this is open space that effectively belongs to the existing communities, and they are going to lose it. We can't...
We can ensure that gets addressed by allocating the capital receipts to providing that.
Not unless we have the land, Chair. We'd need to have the land. We'd need to purchase some land from the housing development. And
we can condition it or provide it elsewhere or improve public open space elsewhere. But anyway, I'll put your recommendation to committee, but also Councillor Ayres. You've got another point?
Yes, Chair. My other point is a concern looking at the junction design at the top of Oregon Way, on the Oregon Way site, in that there's a sort of slightly offset crossroads being indicated with the use of that land, and maybe it's going to be a roundabout at the top of there. But it's a high point with a very steep top to it, and I think it's going to be a blind hump if it's constructed in that way, and I'm not convinced that we will get the best junction arrangement by selling that bit of land and not bit either to the east or west of it, which we also own. So before we launch into selling this bit, I think we ought to take some advice from DC Development Control Highways and make sure that we're giving them land for which a good junction can be achieved.
I'm sorry, Councillor Kerr, but I feel that's an issue for the developer and the purchaser and for the planning committee, not for this stage of the inquiry. Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Chair. Just a caution, and I think you've picked up on it from what Councillor Kerr has said. I do support the idea that the money should be ring-fenced, and then the ward council is fully consulted about what mitigation can be provided from that money of the sale of the ransom strips. But we do need to be careful here to not specify that it has to be delivered within any development site, because that's the job of the developers to provide, for example, open space within a housing development and not use ring-fence money to do that. That's their job, not for us to hand over more money. And I'm sure the ward council was ensure that didn't happen, but we need to be very careful that that isn't, should we say, laid on the table and allowed to be an excuse for developers to use money from elsewhere that they should be providing themselves.
I'm sure, like you say, the planning committee will be looking for provision of public open space and parks within the development anyway, which is a requirement, as a requirement from the developer. The funds raised could be used to develop public open space, parks and play areas in the wider, slightly wider area of the community. Right, we've heard Councillor Kerr's recommendation twice. Can I take hands of those in favour? Those against? Okay, it's lost Councillor Kerr, because I think, and that's probably right, because we've also heard Councillor Ayres' proposal. Can I put that?
Chair, so I'm going to just slightly look at the wording on this one based on what we've discussed around the public open space. So I just thought I'd slightly reword of it to see if people prefer this or the original version. So I've gone for that. We recommend that any money raised from the sale of these parcels of land will be ring-fenced to be spent within the relevant wards on matters determined through consultation with and taking input from the ward members, including but not limited to public open space, recreational area and park and play area improvements. So trying to touch on a little bit around that public open space that we've just discussed. I can take the changes out, I can leave them in. I'm happy to see what people think.
It sounds good to me, not limited to. It sounds a good expression.
Yeah, including but not limited to.
I'll take hands in favour of that. Anybody against? And that's agreed then. You've got that, Stephen, yeah? Okay, anything else to be said on the paper? Other than one question from me, Emily, is this a paper that could be subject to calling?
It's a key decision, so yes.
Sorry, Chair, do you need a seconder for that? If so, I'm happy to do that. I don't know if somebody indicated or not.
I'll put Matt down as a seconder for the amendment, the recommendation we've just passed. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So this report sets out the proposed adult social care fees and charges for 25-26. Chair, this is part of the report that is also linked to the Council's budget setting process in terms of fees and charges that have been factored into the Council's overall budget process. So what this report sets out is proposed fee increases for a number of service areas and the percentages that have been proposed and that have been modelled in for residential care, nursing care, home care, supported living, extra care and day opportunities amongst others. In addition to that, in recognition of national living wage increases and national insurance contributions, an additional £1 million has also been factored in following government announcements as part of the overall modelling that's taken place. So in terms of what's proposed, Chair, if I can refer to the recommendations because that's easier to outline. So in terms of the recommendations in the report, what is proposed is a 4.7% increase for standard residential care and nursing care for weekly fee rates, 4.1% for home care package services, 4.1% for supported living, 4.1% for extra care, and also in relation to direct payments, similar 4.1 uplift based on an information provided on a case-by-case basis. In terms of services that are provided by the Council, 2.8 recommendation sets out similar percentages for uplifts for residential, for Bonsall View in terms of respite, and then around 3% for Care Link and 4.1% similarly for Shared Lives in that sort of category of services provided. And then it talks on, the main body of the report talks about other information as well. So Chair, in summary, those are the percentages that have been factored in and are part of the Council's budget setting process, and the report sets out further information to support that. And these fees sort of are comparable to other authorities, but other authorities, of course, are working through their own budget setting process in terms of what they factor in. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Kerr.
Two questions, please, Chair. One on 4.8, the second paragraph below the table says that for complex customers placed with specialist providers and subject to non-standard contracts, requests for uplift must be submitted with evidence to the Council between the 2nd of January and the 1st of March, ahead of the forthcoming financial year. I just want to check that those people have been, relevant people have been informed about that, otherwise they won't know that they've got that deadline. And there are quite a lot of references to the subsequent financial year, which in terms of that sentence is clear, but sometimes it says from the first Monday in April of the subsequent financial year. And I just want to make sure we are talking about the year immediately rather than subsequent to a deadline on the first Monday in April and the subsequent year to the first Monday in April. So it's... Well, my expectation is that it will be applied in 25-26, but when it says of the subsequent financial year and it's already talking about April, it makes me wonder whether we're actually talking about 26-27.
I'm sure the officer can clarify that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to confirm the second bit first, in terms of, yes, it is for the financial year 25-26, not any other financial year. And in terms of the 2nd of January, 1st March, all of this information has been shared with care providers, so they're aware, and that is similar to what happens in previous years about having their information ready for some of that specialist care, and if they need to be considered on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. Two questions. 3.5, could you give some indication of what benchmarking you use for this bespoke situation here? As you say, people with complex needs in residential care and that do not fit with the usual standards for fee frameworks. And at page 6, the bottom of page 6, what numbers or percentage of placements do we fund for individuals needing care outside of the city boundary? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up 3.5 firstly. So on that specialist care aspect, so it depends on a number of factors that get taken into account. For example, what are the healthcare needs of the elderly person, together what are the social care needs, and looking at benchmarking in terms of that profile of need what are the sort of fees we would expect for comparator authorities. So all of that will be taken into account because it is specialist care that's needed, either it's mental health or other aspects of care, and that's why it's dealt with on a package by package basis because of the specialist nature of need. The point on page 6, was it, Chair, in terms of
Out of city bound.
out of city? Yeah, I don't have that level of information with me here, but we would need to have a look at that. But generally speaking, it'll be sort of where placements can't be made within the city, or there's a family preference for some of those, and we would look at those in terms of the number of placements needed to be made out of the city. But generally speaking, most of the packages, and I'm generalising, would be within the city.
So perhaps you could have a look at that and liaise with Councillor Wright on that subject, yeah? In terms of benchmarking, generally, where are we in terms of comparator authorities? Where do we lie in terms of the levels of charge?
Thank you, Chair. Do you mean in terms of the overall package cost, or what we're proposing to inflate by?
Both.
I think the package-wise, we're probably in the city probably slightly lower payers than benchmarked against similar comparators nearby. In terms of the percentage uplift, that information isn't available as yet. And the reason I'm hesitant is, in fact, I was just asking the question of my fellow colleagues in neighbouring authorities this morning, and some of that was available, some of that isn't, because they are also still currently going through this process. But if I was broadly speaking, what threads we're picking up, some are slightly above, some are slightly low, and I think Derby's somewhere in the middle, based on neighbouring authorities.
Alison, you have any thoughts on that, on the level, on the percentage increase?
We did a fair cost of care analysis of about 18 months ago now, didn't we? And we did find that we were probably, for the general packages, not the complex, but for the general, we were probably at the lower end of the fee paying.
Okay, any other thoughts, questions? Otherwise, it's a fairly standard annual increase report. No? Okay, I think we can note the report. Thank you. Moving on then, item 13, potentially a fairly good news story. Hopefully on this one, is that Verna and yourself?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Catherine Williams, Head of Regeneration and Economic Growth. And yes, this is a positive report. We're bringing an update to Cabinet on the Our City, Our River programme for Derby, specifically the Derby Riverside stretch. We've brought reports over the last 10 years during the course of this programme delivery, and we're seeking delegated authority now to progress with the contractual arrangements to deliver that phase of work at Derby Riverside, and accept funding from the Environment Agency to enable that to happen. Over the course of the OCOR programme, we've all seen the increased impacts of climate change on our city, most recently Storm Babette in 2023, which saw river levels reach the highest ever on record. And the report details both the most recent events of flooding and their impact on Derby, but also the work that we've been doing on the Derby Riverside phase of OCOR since the last report came to Cabinet in March 2023. So since that time, we've secured planning consent for this stretch of works. We've completed detailed design. We've done extensive site investigations, and we've done a lot of engagement with a preferred contractor who we're proposing to deliver the works. And we've also shared in the report the latest position on land assembly, because we do need to acquire properties on Stewart Street in order to deliver this phase of works. So we now have vacant possession of 2 out of the 4 properties required, and good progress has been made on the remaining 2. We're also referring in the report to a significant piece of work we did at the end of last year around the business case for Our City, Our River. Because it's 10 years now in delivery, we took a business case update review through both the Environment Agency and DEFRA that showed there was still a good benefit cost ratio of 1.58 for the project overall, and that was approved by the Environment Agency and DEFRA. And as you referenced, Chair, many of you will hopefully have seen in the news last week that the Environment Agency has now confirmed the remaining funding for the Derby Riverside phase. Obviously, there was a time lag between the publication, the writing and the publication of this report and the meeting tonight, and in that intervening period, that funding has been confirmed and has been announced. The other point to mention in the report is Shardlow, because there are changes to the levels of defence in the neighbouring settlement that are required once we do the Derby Riverside works. And we're asking for approval to allow the Environment Agency to undertake those works rather than Derby City Council. And the cost of those are all included in Derby Riverside. So the recommendations are for the delegation of authority, both for the contractual arrangements for Derby Riverside and for acceptance of the funding, and to approve the delivery works of Shardlow and the associated expenditure of that. So happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Obviously, with the previous phases and the planning work and the design work for this phase of OCOR, we should be, and plus we also have some funding from other areas already been received. We should be in a position to move positively on this phase of the OCOR works and do it in a timely fashion. Because whilst you say we've been working on it for 10 years, we've had the flood incidents are becoming more frequent. Are we able to say what the timescales might be? I get that we've got the problems over buying the properties, but what's the ambition in relation to timescale?
So in terms of the programme, there's a high-level programme in paragraph 4.16 of the report, and we are expecting final costs from the contractor within the next few weeks. That's one piece of the jigsaw puzzle. The other piece is obviously a confirmation of the final funding, which we now have from the Environment Agency. So once we've received those costs, and we are expecting those to be within that budget envelope that we forecast, we're seeking to take the delegated decision to move into contract in February, March time, so imminently, very soon. And the overall programme of delivery of the flood cell, so the wall, the floodgates and the conveyance corridor, that's forecast to take us through to mid-2027. And that's important because some of the other funding that we've secured from the Environment Agency brings with it a timescale requirement. So this is an imminent project, essentially, in answer to your question.
And just to confirm, this is the final element of funding required to be able to complete the job on
Derby Riverside, correct? Yes.
Excellent, thank you. Any comments, questions, Councillor Rawson?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, it's obviously excellent news that the government have provided the funding to be able to allow this to move forward after many years of scratching around trying to assemble funding from all sorts of different places. We do appreciate the work that went into that, but we're in a good place now to move forward. Two questions. One, in terms of the relocation of some of the organisations that were based in the properties that are required, Stewart House, etc. And just to ask, were we able to make sure that all of those jobs have been retained in Derby, and those organisations, if we've been able to help them relocate and remain in the city and keep those jobs. And secondly, whilst it is slightly off this report, the flood defences do facilitate the wider regeneration of North Riverside. So I wonder if there's any update that can be provided on how we might be moving forward with the wider regeneration of that area.
So jobs and regeneration, Catherine.
Thank you. So, so on the first question, there's 4 properties, as I mentioned, one property, Pete House, that had a number of occupiers in it that was multi-tenanted. And I think that's referenced in the report because we were able to work, I think there were 3 or 4 businesses involved. We were able to work with all of them to find alternative premises. I'll have to check the detail behind the scenes, Councillor Rawson, to determine whether they were all relocated in Derby City or elsewhere. But I certainly know from memory that at least 2 of them we were looking at, for example, our Connect managed workspace centres as an option for them. So I'll come back to you with the detail on that. Another property that's required is the former NatWest building on Crompton Street, so Crompton House rather. So they've consolidated, I think, at another base in the city. The other 2 are the Ministry of Justice, so the Probation Service. They've identified another property in Derby City. And the final one is the Methodist Housing Association. And similarly, they've identified another property in Derby City as well. So whilst there's still some work to do on some of the finer contractual arrangements around that, the majority we've been able to achieve. And then in terms of the wider regeneration, there's a couple of things. There's, in the shorter term, we know there's developer interest from a few companies in Derby Riverside, unsurprisingly, given the news, particularly last week, about the funding. So we've been working with them on some of the proposals they would like to bring forward for some of the sites. And now that we have greater certainty over the timescale for the flood defence, we are hopefully going to remobilise conversations with partners such as Homes England to look at how we might be able to look at more holistic regeneration for that part of the city. And part of the issue there has been capacity, really, and concentrating on the flood defence. But now we've got that away, hopefully we can turn to the regeneration element. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Can I just plug as well the Canal Trust as a trustee? I know they're very interested in the work that's going on here, so I'm sure you'll be involving them and in the process going forward. So thank you.
Okay, Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. I'm really pleased this project's moving forward again. I think we don't want to have awful weather like last year, but when we have it, and what's been produced so far has proven its worth. I think it shows how important it is that we go on and continue with the work. So I'm really pleased that this is coming forward. I just wanted to flag up, this is something which has climate at the heart of it, and we have a roundel which has somehow lost all its labels. So I'm going to, at this point, suggest that we ought to have a recommendation, Chair, about the way the roundels work, and to ask Cabinet to request a review of the climate change impact assessment process and the value and consistency of the roundels as provided for Cabinet reports, together with any proposals for change flowing from this review, and to ask for this to be reported to the Council's climate champions as well as to Cabinet/Exec Scrutiny.
Seems to answer your regular queries in relation to these things, and I can't see any reason not to support that. Anybody got any contrary views? So Councillor Kerr's proposing that. We got a seconder? Councillor Rawson? Those in favour? And that's agreed. We got that, Stephen. Thank you. You'll give that to Stephen. Okay. Thank you. In that case, I think we should note the report, welcome the receipt of the extra and sufficient funding, and encourage the Cabinet and Council to move forward with the developments as quickly as possible. Yeah. Okay, excellent, thank you. Moving on, item 14 is schools admission arrangements. Yes, come on.
Thank you, Chair. So this report relates to the Council being the admissions authority for our maintained schools and voluntary schools in Derby. The admissions code requires consultation on those admissions arrangements for 26-27, and Chair, to kind of emphasise that all authorities, of course, follow the admissions code, and this report, of course, is drafted with that context in terms of those requirements outlined specifically in the code. No objections were received during the consultation period between 14th October and 25th November 2024. And Chair, this report sets out the proposed admissions arrangements outlined in Appendix 1 and 2. And Chair, just to confirm, these arrangements are similar to previous years and in accordance with what councils are required to do in line with the admissions code. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Councillor Kerr.
Dealing with people struggling to get children into schools is something which I'm sure all councillors get. And they can't all be solved by our code because it isn't always in our gift. And I just wondered whether in one particular area it's something which is being raised with the LGA or whether the government is considering, which is where you have children who aren't going to their local school but want to. They're in the same year groups and the children can't swap, they have to go on a waiting list. And swapping two children would solve two families' problems with transport or with getting siblings into the same school, but we can't do it unless the regulation has changed very recently. But it's one of the things I find very difficult to explain to parents when they bring that scenario to me.
Thank you, Chair. Good question. In fact, the difficulty, as Councillor Kerr is outlining, is that councils follow what are very sort of explicit requirements of the code, and what Councillor Kerr has outlined isn't possible in line with the current code.
Chair, the question was whether the LGA is taking this up with the government or whether we could ask the LGA to take this up with the government. It's not just a Derby issue.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not aware of the LGA looking at the emissions code or those 2 points, but happy to ask the LGA in terms of are they doing any work in relation to the code and I guess some of the points that have been made here. But certainly, Chair, in terms of as a council, we've not received anything from Central Government Department for Education on any work they may be doing in relation to the code. But I'm happy to ask the LGA the question.
It's certainly an issue that all education authorities will be struggling with, and something that it depends where it is on the agenda and priorities of both the education and the LGA, perhaps. So if you don't mind asking the question, and be interesting to see if it's on anybody else's radar and anything being done to tackle the issue. Yeah. Okay, in that case, I think we can note the report. Resolve to note the report and move on to item 15, which is the Housing Revenue Business Plan.
Thank you, Chair. Maz Hussain, HRA Business Manager. This report is the annual 30-year HRA Business Plan. That report seeks approval on the HRA Business Plan, but specifically the rent increase, the service charge increase, management and maintenance fee, and also the HRA revenue budget, as well as a capital programme. The HRA business plan has 12,500 properties. It generates circa 73 million in revenue income, 64 of it from dwelling and the balance being non-dwelling and service charges. The revenue, along with supporting the maintenance and management of those properties, also supports the financing of the capital programme, which equates to 43 million, 16 of which is for the major replacement of major components, but also the new build and acquisitions programme of 27 million. In terms of the HRA business plan's historic recent past, 23-24, we had a 7% cap on rent increases. The rent standard allowed CPI plus 1%, which would have equated to 11.1, which meant the HRA lost nearly £100 million over the 30 years as a result of the 4.1% loss in the increase, before which, during a 4-year period from 2016 to 2020, from the rent reforms required a reduction of rents by 1% over the 4 years, whilst inflation was increasing. That meant the HRA lost in real terms 13.8%, which equated to just shy of 300 million in terms of a 30-year revenue stream. Other factors that have impacted on the business plan have been taken into account is the regulator of social housing new consumer standards, which is put on new responsibilities, accountabilities on the landlord, the net zero decarbonisation impact on the housing stock, the asset management plan and the component replacement over the next 30 years, as well as a ambitious capital programme of replacement and acquisitions. With those pressures, we have still maintained to keep managed to keep the reserve balance above the minimum required 7 million over the 30 years. The report specifically seeks approval for a rent increase of 2.7%, which is in line with the rent policy and the rent standard. That will result in our rents being still below market. We will be, based on a 2-bedroom unit, the council rents will be 57% of market rents. Over the last decade, inflation has increased by 34%, whereas council rents have increased by 23%, as compared to market rents, which has gone up by 53%. The service charge, the report seeks approval for most service charges at 1.7%, which is in line with CPI, with the 4 exceptions. Communal cleaning and ground maintenance, we're seeking approval for 90 pence per week per service charge. For utilities, which includes gas, electricity and water, a cap of £3, so it'll be up to £3, but not necessarily £3. And furniture packs are has to be frozen. Within the capital programme, it proposes a replacement of 80 units per year over the 30-year business plan, which equates to a net loss of 620 units through the right to buy process, which in actual fact is a much better position than last year. Last year we were anticipating 23% loss in stock, but because of the right to buy changes, that's a significant improvement of the plan. The plan also includes proposals for saving of £1 million over 3 years between 2026 through to 2029. The report has gone through a consultation process, both with the operational board at Derby Homes, customer voices, but also an electronic survey sent out to tenants. That's I invite questions, Chair. That's the report.
Okay, thank you. Questions, comments? Councillor Kerr.
I just want to highlight to people, Chair, the table under rent policy, paragraph 413, and it just shouts to me at how it's not surprising that people come to us and say they want to have a council house and they don't want to have somebody else's, because the rents that Derby Homes is managing to balance a budget and provide an excellent service for, and it's in the top quartile of almost all the measures in terms of housing standards, is, I think, exceptional. So the money is absolutely needed, but the way in which it's being squeezed, and every social housing provider is finding life difficult at the moment. The graphs earlier in that report, Chair, showing how the revenue, say the reserves are being eaten into, is I find quite worrying, and I'm hoping that this government will be able to do something about this. Thank you.
More of a comment there than a question, but thank you for that. Any other comments, questions? I think in another forum, the concern that we looked at was we acknowledged the causes of the loss of income to the HRA by the 4% and other factors, but at the same time, the right to buy changes have helped the overall picture. But what work is the losses to the HRA and to the housing funding acknowledged, and is there any pressure, any plans to address the loss in the previous years?
Thank you, Chair. There is work being undertaken by various representative groups, including the LGA, CWAG, NAFA. So there is ongoing work and consultation. I know MHCLG and LGA have commissioned consultants to go through the impact on the self-financing model, but also the right to buy reforms. We have had decisions on, for example, the capping of discounts, but there's further outcome to come from the consultation that's just recently taken place.
Okay, well, I think we need to keep an eye on that because it is worrying, as referred to, that ultimately the projection is that in the 30 years, the balance would be down to the minimum or even slightly below the minimum required, subject to other outside influences. So any developments or concerns or any pressure that we can add to the recognition of the issues, then Cabinet and the Council should fully take up.
Absolutely, Chair. We have recently provided to the rent consultation the Council's views in terms of all of those historic pressures and what we feel is the way forward to ease some of these pressures and help with future housing requirements for affordable and social housing.
Perhaps you could highlight that at Cabinet on Wednesday and make sure that they're aware of taking into proper consideration that projection would be a good idea, I think.
Will do, Chair, thank you.
Okay, any other comments, questions? And in that case, we'll note the report and move on to item 16, which is the Q3 financial monitoring.
Thank you, Chair. So this report summarises the Council's financial forecast outturn for Q3, which is the position as at the 31st of December 2024. The Council's currently forecasting a pressure, which is an overspend of 6.366 million on the revenue budget. Mitigations are outlined in the report, and that's a reduction of 2.591 million from the Q2 position, so a real positive direction of travel between Q2 and Q3, and a movement of 3.2 million from Q1 that was reported earlier in the year as the position at the end of June, and we were reporting a forecast overspend of 9.6 million. So some really good work done during the course of the year to bring that overspend down to what's been reported in this report. The key areas of the forecast outturn position of the council-wide revenue budget are outlined in the report, and a detailed Appendix 5 details the narratives for each of the significant variances. The Council continues to experience demand pressures with social care services and services relating to homelessness. These pressures are being mitigated by delivering underspends across other areas of the Council. Spend still continues to be scrutinised at officer spending and recruitment panels, and as identified in the report, there are nearly £9 million of underspends offsetting the pressures being faced. In order to remain within the budget and reduce the need to utilise reserves, all directorates will need to continue with delivery of service mitigation plans, and the ambition is to drive that overspend down even further in the final quarter. The report details progress against delivery of the 8.121 million for the savings this financial year, with reporting of 100% of those savings being forecast to be delivered. In terms of capital, the capital forecast for this year has been reviewed and updated. The 4-year forecast is now a spend of 187.7 million, and the significant areas of slippage on the capital programme are contained within the report at paragraph 4.4.3. The Treasury Management forecast outturn for this year is a net balance position. The Council is in a need to borrow position. The cost of this borrowing is being forecast and built into the Treasury Management budget. The Housing Revenue Account is forecast to contribute 650,000 back into Housing Revenue Account reserved, and that's the level that it was originally budgeted for. And the Dedicated Schools Grant continues to face pressures on the high needs block. Q3 is forecasting a reduction to the in-year deficit of 1.856 million, resulting in a just over 6.7 million deficit this financial year. The statutory override, which is the override position that allows us not to account for those deficits on our balance sheet and held by central government. That statutory override is currently under review by the government and is in place until March 2026, and we're waiting further announcements on that particular issue. Thank you.
Okay, so take any questions, comments on the update? Yes, Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Alison. Just an observation, really. Appendix 5, page 180. The actual category that relates to CPYP turnover, where the reference is made to vacant positions in the educational psychologist service and early help services has increased in Q3, mostly due to vacant post held as part of the MTPF staff. Saving proposals, therefore, the previous forecast spend has been removed for the remainder of the final financial year. Now, in a context where our young people, children in school, are still suffering from the impact of the pandemic, and we know there's been an increase in children in school, young people suffering from mental health issues and problems relating to their ability to adjust to school, function effectively in school. It's quite worrying, actually, that those positions, a position, has now been removed when there is a need. Now, I also met with a team in the council who are providing, assisting young people who are known as NEETs, not in education, not in training, to assist them to access apprenticeships, being placed in a workplace. And I was informed by the team that they're about to be disbanded because they're part of the cuts. Now, it's not just this council, but I think society generally take a rather short-term view in terms of supporting our young people, or future citizens, so to speak. And then we wonder further down the road, they end up being incarcerated or whatever. So I think I just want to make the point that it's lamentable that that particular service is going to be removed, because as most of our cities, we do need educational, psychological support for our young people who are struggling in the education system. Thank you.
Okay, Alison?
Yes, just to acknowledge that, I suppose just to give a little bit of assurance that in terms of the spending panels and the recruitment panels that are in operation, we don't have a blanket vacancy freeze across the organisation, for exactly those reasons. There are areas that we do need to recruit to that are front-facing services that are absolutely vital. So just to give some assurance about that in terms of the education psychologists vacancies. So that would have been the fact that we were planning to, forecasting to recruit to those and they'd not materialised during the year. But I do know that there are some additional resource being put in there in terms of agency. I can't comment on the NEAT. I'm not aware of any savings in any of the NEAT services as part of the 25-26 savings. So that is that's news to me. So just to give you again a little bit of assurance that those NEAT services have not been reduced.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Kerr.
Chair, later on in the report, in the meeting, we've got a report on our performance, the report for, sorry. Later on in the meeting, we have our performance report, and one of the things it highlights as needing attention is some of the work we're doing for young people, as Councillor Wright's just mentioned, and their EHCP delivery. And in this report, we have a note that the high needs block outturn is actually better than it has been. And I'm just wondering whether that high needs block better outturn is due to the poor performance in actually achieving the EHCP deadlines and getting the young people the help or the placement that they really need. Now, I hope that isn't the case, because young people deserve to be in the right place, in the right learning environment, but we are not achieving those 20-week deadlines, and I just wonder whether it's one reflects the other.
No, that's not the case for this underspend, Councillor Kerr. This is because our strategy for placing children within the city and reducing our need for independent special school places outside of the city boundary. That's the main reason for this underspending this Q3 report. In terms of the ability to deal with the 20-week and the performance report, yes, we do absolutely acknowledge that. And you will see when we come on to the next item on the agenda that there's been some additional investment into the SEND services in terms of improving that performance on timescales for assessment.
Thank you, it's reassuring.
Okay, unless there's any other comments, questions, I suggest we resolve to note the report. There's some more finance to discuss here. In item 17, for example.
Thank you, Chair. So, as you will recall, Executive Scrutiny Board considered the December Cabinet report at their meeting on the 13th of January. This report is an update to that report and deals with some of the changes from the local government finance settlement and the consultation period that we ran until the 19th of January. So the report outlines the Council's budget proposals for the period 25-26 to 27-28, and those proposals outline a balanced position for next year and an indicative balanced position for 26-27. This has not been achieved without taking difficult decisions, and the Council has funded and is facing over £39 million worth of pressures next year, which is far in excess of the resources that have been made available to us next year, and requires the delivery of just over £10 million worth of savings. As detailed in the report, the provisional finance settlement was received on the 18th of December and it was welcome news for the sector as it provided an overall increase of around 6% rise in the core spending powers of local authorities, and for Derby, our core spending power increased by 22.6 million, which is an increase of 8.6%, and that was above average, the average sector increase. The provisional settlement provided some welcome additional monies for Derby, particularly seen in the allocation of a new grant called the Recovery Grant, which is £600 million nationally. And we received an award of £6.7 million for that grant, and it was pleasing to see that the grant distribution favoured those authorities like Derby with high deprivation and a low council tax base. A response to the lobbying of the fairer distribution of those councils that have experienced the hardest financial challenges of late. The December 2024 budget report did not anticipate the full increases in funding, and this resulted in an additional £8.6 million, and from that, by which the budget was consulted on. This has enabled the Council to provide some further welcome investment in services and, crucially, has enabled the replenishment of reserves to provide some further financial resilience. A detailed summary of those changes are included in paragraph 4.3.3 of the report, but the headlines include investment into special education and disability services, which I've just previously referred to, providing a cultural recovery resource to support those partners facing significant financial challenges, responding to the emerging pressures from Q3, which is the report that I've just gone through, with additional budget allocations to those areas that continue to grow from when we set the budget report in December, and that's in particular to homelessness and increased use of temporary accommodation. Additional allocations for council tax support has also been given through for households facing financial hardship through the Council Tax Hardship Fund. There's investment into waste minimisation services and an additional capital investment for a new depot at Stores Road. December's report also contained some significant areas of investment: £16 million into people's services, £3 million into place services, and provision in the capital programme for a new crematorium. The Council will seek to minimise compulsory redundancies where possible, and the proposals in the report will reduce the workforce by an estimated 95.3 full-time equivalent posts next year if the proposals are implemented. This is unfortunately necessary to deliver the required savings to balance the budget and progress to financial sustainability over the medium term. The Council has been responsibly managing vacancy control over recent months, and this means that the in-year overspend position has improved, but also allows the deletion of those vacant posts to bridge the budget gap, reducing the need for redundancies. The Council operates a voluntary redundancy scheme and is confident that it can deliver the majority of potential further reductions by this means. In terms of the dedicated school grant, which is detailed in the report, on the 18th of December, the Department for Education announced the DSG for Derby. In terms of main items within there, is the early years element of this funding has seen a significant increase due to the continued rollout of the extended early years offer, and the high needs block was increased by 7.8%, which amounts to £4.6 million for Derby and takes the high needs block to 63 million. In terms of the reserves, the report details an assessment of the adequacy of reserves which were required as part of the budget process. These demonstrate that the Council is able to set a balanced budget for next year and an indicative balanced budget for the following year, with a plan to ensure that its finances in the short to medium term are on a financial sustainable basis. Contributions to reserves total 10.1 million next year, with a total of 11.5 over the medium term, and this will mean that the general fund balance for next year will be estimated to be 3.85% of the net revenue spend, and it's forecast to be just over 2% at the end of this financial year. The reserves will still require further replenishment over the medium term, and any unplanned, unbudgeted shock will potentially undermine the financial sustainability of the Council. These planned contributions are essential to improve that financial sustainability. Detailed within Appendix 7 of the report, the Council is also required to consider the Section 25 report, which is a report from myself, the Section 151 officer, and that details the adequacy of the reserves and the robustness of the estimates contained within the medium-term financial plan. The report includes proposals to increase council tax by the maximum 4.99%. That's utilising the 2.99% levy flexibility and also additional 2% social care precept. In terms of the capital programme, despite the current financial constraints, the Council retains a capital ambition for the City, which delivers themes across areas such as economic regeneration, health, well-being, economic vibrancy and diversification. And some of the new major projects for 25-26 include a new depot, as I've previously alluded to, a new crematorium, a remodelling and reopening of the Guildhall, completion of the Eastern Gateway, and investment into the small children's home accommodation strategy. The Council carried out a detailed consultation exercise between the 18th of December 2024 until the 17th of January with councillors, key stakeholders, groups, members of the public, trade unions and the business communities, and those details of that consultation feedback are included in Appendix 9 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that summary of the report. Comments, questions? Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. It was the first the school grants that surprised me, in that highlighted in 1.5.2 and I think later on it says that excluding the grants, the increase in the schools block is 0.359%, which is well under inflation, and even the 2.23%, which is the per pupil average, is significantly less than what we have deemed the adult social care costs are. And I suspect that adult social care costs are going up at a similar rate to schools costs, being made up a significant amount of staffing and then additional costs. And I was wondering whether we know what other LEAs are getting in terms of their increase in that funding, excluding the grants.
So it will all be comparable in terms of the move to the national funding formula in the ways that the government will allocate funding to local authorities and then passed on to schools. So it's on a national formula, so there will be consistent allocations across the country with that. I think we're still waiting for a few announcements as well. I don't think, just to clarify, I don't think the national insurance contribution for the employees' increases has been notified as yet. So that will be additional funding that will come. That will be additional funding that will come through, Councillor Kerr. So that will be on top of those, and that will be a significant increase for schools as well.
Thank you for that. And if national insurance is still to come, then that's reassuring. Under paragraph 4.3.4, it highlights another of our challenges, the housing benefit subsidy pressure. And I was wondering whether there are any additional mitigations being explored on this, because I would hope, again, this is not just a Derby issue, this is a national issue. And there may be other things that we can be learning from other local authorities or other ideas that we can be taking forward here.
Quite fortuitous that we've got our housing colleagues in the room tonight, but in terms of what we've been dealing with so far, in terms of the mitigations, obviously Abbey Lodge has been one of our, has been an example of that will significant capital investment, will improve outcomes for those people that reside there, but also will reduce the housing benefit subsidy loss in relation to those individuals. We have had a temporary pilot scheme where we've been looking at the allocation of our own social housing stock for temporary accommodation as well. So there are, and we are looking at business cases in relation to sort of leaseholder schemes and things that we can sort of increase our housing stock and our access to temporary accommodation. But yes, you're right, Councillor Kerr, it is an absolute massive national issue, and it is becoming probably ahead of adult social care. It's been one of the biggest things that that is facing local government, and we continue to lobby those issues to government centrally. I don't know if our housing colleagues have got anything they want to add to that.
Yes, Ian, I don't know whether or not you'd want to briefly touch on the an explanation around the housing subsidy loss, how that comes about now and what's being done to it.
Thank you, Chair. The subsidy loss occurs where people on the housing waiting list are put into non-council accommodation, typically bed and breakfast and temporary accommodation. The council, whereas it will obviously have to cover the costs of that rent, and it does that through housing benefit payments, it can't reclaim all of that housing benefit payment share, and the difference between what we can claim back from government in terms of housing benefit and what we've paid out, that is the subsidy loss that we incur. Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Good. Councillor Bonser next then.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question on 4.3.3. In the changes to the budget, there's a line, Street Pride Pay Award. I don't quite understand what that would be, why it's just Street Pride.
Yeah, so we allocate a global amount for inflation to cover pay award. But what we've seen in previous years is we've been awarded a flat rate, pay award's been a flat rate. So for services, for individual budgets, that would be a different percent. So for services that have high volume and lower paid individuals, a flat rate of, say, £1,500 a year is a bigger percent on that budget to what it would be over a service that had got sort of higher scaled individuals. So what this additional funding has allowed us to do for this is to have a look at those budgets where we think probably aren't properly based correctly and need to just reflect what those costs are. So that service has probably been missing out a little bit on the way that we've been doing our budget modelling over previous years.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Chair. The government's national insurance increase is significantly impacting on small, medium, large businesses and, of course, public organisations such as local authorities. So, a couple of questions on the 515 million. Why is it taking so long to get confirmation that that will indeed be the amount that Derby City Council is going to be allocated? And also a question on future years as well. 26, 27 and 27, 28, that amount appears in future years. So where has the confidence come from that government will be providing that amount year on year? I mean, obviously that isn't going to cover compound increase the financial year following this one, and then even more so the next one. But I'm a little bit intrigued as to where that assumption has come from. And also clarity, sorry, a third question, Chair, on the actual amount allocated, how much above the expected amount of 515 will be needed to be found in regards to council contracts and the impact of national insurance on those services that we've procured that will also be impacted by the national insurance increase? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So in terms of the first question, the timescale, obviously we get the provisional local government finance settlement on the 18th of December. Then there's a consultation period that runs until we got the final settlement, which is what we got last week, and we were notified of that allocation. So that's kind of the normal process that we would expect to get in terms of not receiving it until last week. I think, to be fair, I think there's been lots of, I think they've been waiting for lots of consultation responses around the allocation of that and what data they're going to use for the allocation of that, so it's got a fairer distribution. So I think that's all been part of that consultation period. In terms of future years allocations, we've only had 1 year budget allocation, so we have to assume at this point that it's being rolled into the base allocation, and we'll get that continuing after from 26-27 onwards. But obviously that's subject to future comprehensive spending review and allocations through the sector. So that's sort of working on our best knowledge at the moment. In terms of increased national insurance costs to other providers other than those employees directly employed by the council, yes, there will be pressures associated with that. Adult social care being one of those, and as Gamal referenced in his fee report, there'd been an additional £1 million worth of resource allocated for dealing with employee national insurance in that particular sector. But yes, we anticipate that costs will be passed on to us through contracts as our providers face those increased costs in the future.
Sorry, Chair, not to sort of prolong this, but just on the future years then, the assumption that government are going to provide that money year on year, where has that confidence come from? Because if you, roughly, you're looking at potentially a £1.2 million pressure in future years, should the government not provide that year on year. So have government indicated to this council that 515 million, hopefully increasing accordingly to the compound interest that we'd have to pay? Have you had that specific instruction from government that they're going to keep that in the base budget?
Yeah, they don't give us individual allocations, but what they do give as part of the funding settlement is they announce the CSP, the core spending power for the 3 years, and that core spending power indicates that money is put into future years.
Okay, Alison, thank you. Obviously, there's going to be other opportunities to look at the budget and the medium-term financial plan, particularly around jobs and reserves, future projects and council tax, etc. But from this board's point of view, when we last met, the settlement, we were looking at a potential increase in the funding available of 3.7 million. I think we were projecting it, weren't we? That was the guesswork, the guesstimate in relation to the funding settlement, but you've explained how we've received extra funding to that, to a total of £22 million in funding as a result of the settlement. Is that right?
The 22 million is the extra that we've got in our core spending power. So yes, that's extra, but that's not a difference between now and the December report. We'd assumed some of that in the December report.
Okay. The difference then that was assumed was 3.7 to 8 point something, wasn't it?
Yeah, I can't recall what the 3.7. The 8.6 is what we've got additional from the December report. So those that we'd assumed in December to what we actually got in the settlement. And as I said, the majority of that was in relation to the recovery grant, because at the time we did the December report, we didn't know the basis of the distribution of that particular funding allocation.
So I'm just keen to explore this expression of £22 million increased spending power. That's been interpreted as a extra money provided by government this year. Is it not the case that every year in the settlement there's an increase from inflation, from grants, from a variety of other things, averaging probably 18 million, 20 million over the past few years. Is that what's happened previously?
That's correct. Yes, we do get significant allocations to fund pay award from government. So yes, the 22.6 is more than we've had recently, but is generally around about that, as you said, 18 to 20 million pound mark. I do have those figures from previous allocations if you want me to find them out and give them.
So it's an interpretation of where the 22 point something million has come from, and how much extra that is been causing some confusion, I would suggest. Okay, as I say, there's opportunity, future opportunity to discuss things, particularly like reserves, and whilst I absolutely acknowledge the need to rebuild the reserves, recent history hasn't been consistent on that. We put some money back into reserves the last 12 months, but of course the yo-yo effect has meant that we've used those reserves again to balance the budget for this year. Is that the case?
Yes, we have overspent over a number of financial years, which is drawn down on reserves. I think the positive element of this budget is that we have put £39 million into budgets for next year, and we've had the opportunity to refresh that money in terms of what the position is at Q3. So I would be hoping we would be starting the new financial year with a adequately funded budget proposal for the council.
But there's nothing to stop the administration or the council using the replenished reserves as a backstop, call it what you like, a slush fund, and reusing them again in the next 12 months?
There's nothing to stop the council from reusing reserves, no.
I think there may be some more debate about that. And then, of course, there's the debate about priorities, and you've described some of the priorities that have come out and the projects that are planned, but they can only be made possible by the full increase in council tax of 4.99%. Is that right?
Through council tax and other funding streams that's available to the council.
Okay, but some of this extra funding could, of course, been used to reduce the amount by which the council tax has to be increased.
That's subject to council's decision.
That's the priority of the administration. Okay, as I say, that might be subject to some future debate. Okay, any further questions, comments at this stage? No? Okay, unless there's any other recommendations to come, I think we should resolve to note the report. Thank you. Moving on then to item 18 and the refreshing of the local plan. Oh, there she is. Heather's hiding behind you.
Good evening, it's Heather Green and Director of Corporate Management. I think as we've heard, there are significant financial challenges being faced by the local government sector. However, as a council, we remain ambitious for our city. This report presents Cabinet with an updated council plan for 2025 to 28, which sets out our priority themes and outcomes over the next 3 years and should be read alongside our medium-term financial plan. Findings from consultation are shown at paragraph 4.8 and include specific feedback received through the Let's Talk Derby public survey, discussions with members of the Derby Partnership Board, local businesses and our equality groups such as Voices in Action, the 60 Plus Forum and Access Hub. Key changes in the refreshed council plan include a new mission statement, which is together we're building a Derby to be proud of, renaming what was Resilient City as Inclusive City, changing Working Smarter to be Connected Council, and overall updating all of the areas and focus and outcomes against those council plan themes. So the draft plan is currently shown in Appendix 3. We're currently in the process of just creating a designed version which will be available for full council. There are a number of recommendations, but subject to approval by Cabinet, the council plan will be referred to full council for approval at the end of February. I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Comments, questions? Councillor Kerr.
I'm afraid there's a lot of good stuff in here, but as one of the headlines, which is to do with action on climate, under the climate implications, we get a plus 19, which is a pretty high score for influence. And I think it's probably fairly significant that that is the only thing that's been listed there. That if you do a search for climate or carbon on the report, on the plan, you don't get very much. There are a few references, but this doesn't feel like a plan from a council which has declared a climate emergency, which would indicate that we actually need to take action and do something. Buried within it, there are actions that will make a difference, and we do have the Climate Change Action Plan. But I'm just disappointed that it's not been drawn out in stronger terms rather than just a headline to say this is something which concerns us. It is in the delivery of our officers and how they take some of these things forward. So I am hopeful, but I am not confident. Thank you.
Noted. Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. Two documents I'd like to comment on. 2.2, the equality impact document. A few sections of the document, if I can find them. Page 5 of the Appendix 2, where it focuses on demographical issues to do with ageing in particular, and it cites a number of interesting statistics there in relation to certification and qualification that our working age group have obtained compared to other cities or regions, which denotes issues also of structural social inequality. What is interesting here, the third paragraph down on page 5, where it states that as a city we have a high proportion of people who are out of work, on benefits. So there's that. It also states what we are aware of, issues relating to life expectancy within the city, that it's lower than the average, which I think is probably indicative of the increasing inequality. It also states at the final paragraph on that page, increasing issues in relating to physical, mental and health and well-being. On page 8, I mean, there are other themes, but on page 8, I just wanted to highlight matters relating to diversity, particular ethnic and racial diversity. If you're going to present this to the public, could you please break down the groups? rather than lump groups together. As such, I don't agree that the proportionality, if I read this wrong, in terms of white and Asian is highest in Derby. I thought it was highest in Leicester, unless I've misread this. I thought Leicester had a higher proportion there. So if we could perhaps give a breakdown of non-white ethnic groups. And then the final page that I wanted to highlight was page 9. The issue that's affecting our society widely in Derby, obviously, in particular, is issues in relation to violence against women and girls. Perhaps we could have more information about what we're doing other than International Women's Day. And also what is interesting is that women constitute the majority population within the city, yet if you look at their participation in the labour market, it's lower than men. I suppose that is probably, it's obvious why that is the case, but as a city that is limited by resources as such, perhaps we ought to be looking at ways in which we can enable women of working age to access the labour force. So there are just some comments on Appendix 2. If I can turn to the Council Plan 2025 to 28, particularly page 1, I assume that this document is about the narrative that we are presenting about ourselves. And the narrative on page 3 of that document, I really do think, in light of those structural issues that I've highlighted, particularly the issues of structural inequality, I really do feel in the paragraph, the second paragraph, or is it the third paragraph, that something in there, there ought to be mention about our city's aspiration to foster community and social cohesion. I hope we haven't forgotten what happened to Derby and other cities in August of this year, where there were threats to our sections of our population. So I do feel that perhaps some wording of that description ought to be in this paragraph, because that should be an aspiration to foster people living together in terms of what they have in common. And then the next page, where you actually list a range of things about the city's profile. I really do think that it's probably worth, under the heading economy, I know you've cited manufacturing, and yes, Derby is one of the major manufacturing cities, but I also think that in giving examples, in addition to manufacturing, we're also excellent at retail. So I think we ought to give an example there in terms of the contribution that retail makes to the city. And what have I listed? I also feel, going on to page 6 here, that somewhere on that page or somewhere else in the document, the word social mobility ought to be included. I'd like to think that part of our ambition as a city and the narrative we tell ourselves, particularly if you're going to replace resilience by inclusion, is that what we would like to do is to make it possible for all our citizens to aspire and achieve the best that they are able to achieve as adults. And part of that is having a social mobility agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. There are a number of, quite a lot of various points of concern, suggestions and further clarification needed there, probably too many for tonight's meeting. So I'm going to ask Heather if you'll liaise with Councillor Wright, review the comments that she's made and address them, make sure that Councillor Wright's views are shared and the information that she requires given. Is that okay?
Thank you, Chair. I think Heather knows me very well.
Okay. Good. Thank you. Any other comments on this plan? No. Other than that, from Councillor Wright, then we'll resolve to note the report, and I'm going to bump Heather up the rest of the agenda and suggest she deals with performance monitoring before we go on to the rest. So, do you want to deal with that now?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much. On item 20, this report presents performance highlights from the period from October to December 24 across a range of measures and milestones included in our council delivery plan, and obviously sits alongside the financial Q3 position as well. We have highlighted some areas of strength, so particularly in relation to our city themes. So, for example, in Green City, the council has piloted a bulky waste voucher scheme in Sinfin and Osmaston to support residents in need. Further to evaluation of that is now being extended to other areas through neighbourhood boards. In terms of City of Growth, in November, the first Derby Promise Festival of Ideas took place and involved a range of primary and secondary school children from across Derby, and they were given the opportunity to experience a range of activities linked to climate action, green careers, opportunities, really to gain skills in a technology or engineering sense. So the event was really successful. From a resilient city point of view, the council has looked to address the city's unprecedented housing needs, which I know came up earlier in the meeting, by redeveloping the Abbey Lodge facility, which offers families much better quality accommodation than some of them currently receiving through bed and breakfast. Just before Christmas, families started moving into that new facility. We've also undertaken a lot of work in terms of cost of living and ran a successful pension credit awareness campaign for local pensioners throughout the autumn. From a vibrancy point of view, I hope councillors were able to experience the excellent festive Derby offer, which attracted more visitors to the city centre than previous years, and we also hosted a record-breaking panto at Derby Arena. And from a working smarter point of view, the council has continued to deliver financial savings as planned through the range of delivery board programmes we have in place, and we have also implemented a new performance and risk system, which will assist both colleagues and councillors to maximise our use of data and insight. So, as a council, we're certainly not complacent. The report does highlight some areas of risk and where further improvement is needed. And 3 areas are identified for further performance review, one of those being sickness absence, the timeliness of education healthcare plans, which was mentioned again earlier in the meeting, and also children placed within 20 miles of a child's home. So they are 3 areas that we are undertaking a deep dive in terms of the kind of the data and the contextual information that we have to really to look at how we can improve in those areas. But they are the sort of the key highlights from the report. The recommendations are to note the highlights and also where further investigation is going to take place. I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Let's do just that then. Questions, comments on the performance? Yes, Councillor Kerr.
There is loads and loads of information here, and I have lots of questions, but I'm going to stick to one, which is on page 16 of the main report table, 16 of 41. CPM 24 is number of young people successfully completing independent travel training, which I mentioned at the budget meeting because this was a line that was seeking to be significantly improved as part of the budget savings. And it's lovely, the numbers have gone up. And we're expecting more people to be, expecting it to get up to 20. But 20 is a really small number compared to the number of young people. So I feel there's a bit of a contrast here between the narrative included in this report and what we were being told about this as a potential budget saving. And I just like a bit more clarity about which I should be listening to hardest.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarity, in terms of independent travel training, it's not really a budget saving as such. What this relates to, of course, Councillor Kerr, is around some children with special needs are able to progress with careful training for independent travel training, and some aren't able to do that. So it will always be a small number that will fluctuate around based on level of need and training to be able to do that. But we've not looked at high numbers of independent travel training for financial savings. It's actually the preparation for adulthood and working with special schools and transition to around carefully, sensitively, where parents and families are happy to proceed with that travel training. Thank you, Chair.
Does that give you some clarity? Yes. Any other questions, comments on the performance monitoring? No? In that case, thank you very much, Heather. I'll go back to item 19, which on the agenda is the compliance and contract financial procedure rules.
Thank you, Chair. That's me. I'm Tony Nash, Head of Finance. This report outlines two items. The first is a bid and subsequent acceptance of funding from the DFE of £300,000. If this bid is successful, it will be matched with £300,000 from the Council, and provision has already been made on the capital programme for this. The funding is to develop further provision in children's homes in partnership with the Integrated Care Board to support children with complex mental health needs and challenging behaviour. The bid is part of Derby's Children's Home Sufficiency and Accommodation Strategy, which aims to enable more children and young people to be closer to home, particularly for those with complex, challenging behaviour where there is insufficient local provision. The report also recommends a delegated authority to the Strategic Director of Peoples, the Section 151 officer, in consultation with the Cabinet member, to add this new scheme to the capital programme for £600,000 when appropriate. Let's take any questions.
Thank you for this, and I'm as sure as I can be that this is the right direction of movement for the young people involved. We had to planning a case where there was a very challenging young person whose placement in the city was causing a lot of concern. And it's something which the planning committee feel that they have quite a lot of understanding of in terms of where we have children's homes of all sorts that work well and where they don't. So as part of this, assuming that we're successful in that bid, I just wonder whether a little bit of probably informal consultation with members of the planning committee might be wise before we go into the purchase of a property, so that we could, and this is consultation that isn't information, but is consultation, asking for feedback, particularly for the ward members in that area about the likely location and whether it's likely to engender a whole host of complaints or not.
Thank you, Chair. Certainly, as Councillor Kerr has outlined, we've had helpful discussions with Planning Committee in terms of training and development sessions. Where possible, that can be done. In other instances, there are multiple variabilities around where properties may or may not be available and where they are suitable. But Chair, in terms of assurance, is that these are homes that Derby City Council will be operating, albeit with a private provider or independent provider, and we would be looking at managing the placements and suitable placements and matching sensibly, and if any issues do emerge, to respond to those. But very happy to engage with planning committee, pre-planning applications around the suitability of homes, but equally around our corporate parenting responsibilities for children in need and children in care. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Mayor, whilst we're on the subject, whilst I understand and agree that the way forward in terms of this and small children's homes, we as councillors have a duty of corporate parenting towards children in care and in need, etc. What provisions are made? How are we going to manage the council's responsibility in that regard? Are we going to have the ability to visit and scrutinise these placements and things? How's that all going to work?
Thank you, Chair. The reason I'm slightly hesitant is, unlike the traditional larger children's homes, they're much more sort of easy to visit and make arrangements. I'm not saying that it's not impossible to do, but we need to engage with children's social care, because most of these small children's homes are family homes for 1 or 2 placements. But certainly happy to engage with members, including colleagues from children's social care, in terms of that discussion, visit and sensible arrangements around these being a solo placement or a young person's home, but happy to work with members on that.
Yeah, probably the Children's Scrutiny Board would need to make these recommendations, but I understand there'll be checks and balances on the care of the children in these placements, but I've not heard of any proposed arrangements in relation to corporate parenting responsibilities.
Thank you, Chair. Very, very briefly, Corporate Parenting Board are fully aware, fully informed around the smaller homes strategy and also the children in care sufficiency strategy. These are all Ofsted registered homes. They will be, so all those safeguarding measures will be in place. Of course, we discuss with Corporate Parenting Board around sufficiency, but also equally meeting the needs of children in care.
Okay, thank you. Tony, is there a second one?
Yes, Chair, thank you. The second is to approve the issue of a VEET notice, and if you don't know, this is a notice that notifies the market of the intention to award a contract to a certain provider without competition. And this is with Alpheus Environmental Services Limited to continue the provision of maintenance of the groundwater treatment at Pride Park. For information, this contract was last procured via open tender in 2016 and received very little response. The scale of the operation is very small and contractors consider this a high risk. There are a limited number of contracts in this specialist area, and Alpheus have been familiar with the plant since its construction, and this also puts other contractors off. In addition to the above, Alpheus has performed extremely well with a faultless record, having worked to improve plant efficiency and reduce operational spend. Thank you.
Okay, any questions, comments? Yes, Councillor Kerr.
As I remember, when the original scheme was put around Pride Park, it was supposed to be time limited, and at some point all the nasties would have been dealt with by the plant, and it was going to be clean water. And I have a feeling that might have been 25, 30 years. I don't think it was as long as 50 years. So I just wondered what the current contamination levels are looking like. Is it falling? Is contamination falling as predicted? And actually, are we going to need to continue to operate this plant for the whole of another 10 years? Because if we're not going to need it, if the trajectory says we've got 2 years left of nasties coming through, we don't need a 10-year contract.
I'm not sure we've got the relevant officers for that detail here, to be honest. Emily can offer some explanation, I think.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Kerr. I'm not an expert on the contamination levels, but this contract is put in place by one of my services for the property team, and this is an ongoing requirement that has not reduced at this point and does need to remain in place. I can't tell you what the contamination level is at the moment, though.
I think it's probably been complicated even more with in recent years with the flooding that's gone on in that area as well, and the need to maintain that that level of service and accessories has been highlighted as part of that. But sure, we can put you in touch with the right officers to find out that, Councillor Kerr. Okay, moving on then. Any other questions on compliance and contract financial procedures? Nope.
Chair, can I just say there is one confidential item that will be on at the end for financial matters.
Right, at 24?
Yeah.
Yes.
As it's been referenced, Chair, it was disappointing to me that there wasn't a short report to a confidential paper on a different subject, which is not what I expected to find when I got there. I think to have a public report is very healthy for democracy and openness.
Okay, well that's difficult to address, but whilst it's only confirmation, we'll talk about it when we get there. That's all right. Okay. That leads us to item 21, the East Midlands Combined Authority, approval of draft education, adult education. Yes, Emily.
Thank you, Chair. So, under this report, Cabinet is being asked to approve the proposed content of the East Midlands Combined County Authority Regulations 2025 relating to skills, which will grant new powers related to adult education functions. These powers are to be transferred from the Department of Education to EMCA under specific sections of the Apprenticeship Skills, Children and Learning Act 2009. This includes funding for adult education and technical qualifications, with the plan for this to be implemented by August 2025. Draft regulations are part of a broader plan under the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act 2023 with a goal of enhancing adult education within the East Midlands. The regulations will enable the EMCA to fund new high-quality technical qualifications similar to the powers already granted to other devolved regions. These powers will be in place for the 2020, well, it's hoped the powers will be in place for the 2025 academic year, ensuring that adult learners in the East Midlands Combined County Authority region have access to the same opportunities as elsewhere. It's important to stress, Chair, that this is a transfer of powers from the DFE direct to EMCA, and there is no ceding of powers from the local authority to the combined authority in this instance. Government have asked that consent is granted by mid-February to allow the parliamentary timetable to be completed for those regulations to be enforced for the academic year 2025.
Okay, so I guess the important thing there is that there is no ceding of powers from the council to EMCA. It's direct from the Education Department and not unexpected.
No, these were powers that were envisaged in the original proposal and were part of the original proposal that was consulted on, and it's just a follow-up of that. And there will be others along similar lines over time.
Any comments or questions? Councillor Wright.
Yes, Chair. I have to say who I am. I'm Councillor Wright, Councillor Arboretum Ward. I haven't said that once, I'm saying now. I sit on the EMCA's Skills, Employment and Skills Committee, and whilst I acknowledge there's no conceding of power, I think sitting on that committee, I think myself and other council representatives, I think our major concern is in the operational element of the delivery of skills and training. The concern that perhaps we need to ensure that there is interfacing between what happens at the combined authority level and what happens in the locality. I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Yes, I take your point, but I guess part of the rationale behind all this is to make it possible to do the appropriate level of skills training in the appropriate areas on the right subjects, and to do that, they've got to liaise locally with what's required. So it should come naturally, if you like. Okay, any other comments, questions in relation to this? No? And then, in that case, we'll resolve to note the report and move on to item 22, which I've got to ask you to consider a resolution to exclude press and public, that the under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting during discussion of the following items on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, and the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Is that agreed? Agreed. Okay. You can turn off the recording, please.